Good morning. So thank you all for coming. I'm Scott O'Seidel. I am the Terry Third Thursday Chair, and it is my pleasure to welcome you all to the Terry Executive Education Center for Terry Third Thursday. Thank you for being here this morning. I am filling in for Dean Ayers, who unfortunately could not be with us today, but wanted to extend his warm welcome to you all. Terry Third Thursday is a monthly breakfast event based here in Atlanta, and it is open to alumni, students, and anyone interested in networking with Terry folks. It takes a lot to organize Terry Third Thursday. We have 9 alumni board members and also an incredible team from UGA that helps me a lot. And then we have some fantastic sponsors. Our corporate sponsor is Synovus, and our media sponsor is Public Broadcasting Atlanta, WABE. So a round of applause for our sponsors, please. As tradition, we are taking a break in July, but we have some great upcoming speakers resuming in August. On August 15th, we have Jim Chasteen, who is co-founder and CEO of ASW Distilleries. And then on September 19th, we have Jamie Gregory, who is the CFO of Synovus. We've got some other ones lined up, but more on that coming soon. Now, without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Katie Kirkpatrick. She is president and CEO of Metro Atlanta Chamber, or MAC, as they like to call it. Katie has served as CEO and president of the 164-year-old Metro Atlanta Chamber, or MAC, since June 2020, but has been influencing Atlanta's policy and advocacy for 15 years. Previously, MAC's chief policy officer, Kirkpatrick, served as the link between the Metro Atlanta business community and local, state, and national governments. She also galvanized the MAC public policy team's priorities around business climate, talent development and education, infrastructure, and community. As president and CEO, she led the adoption of a new framework for MAC, focusing on 3 strategic imperatives of economy, talent, and community. Katie, a registered professional engineer, started her career at Goldkist as director of corporate environmental engineering. She joined MAC in 2007 as vice president for environmental affairs. And as an alumni of Leadership Atlanta, she contributes to causes such as the American Heart Association's Heart of Atlanta Gala and Cafe Momentum's internship program for justice-involved youth. Katie lives in Atlanta with her husband Dow and has 2 sons. One is a student at the University of Georgia who is here today. Go Dogs! And the youngest son is at the Lovett School, where she can be found with her camera working the concession stand at a baseball game. Katie, welcome. And then today's format is actually going to be a fireside chat format. And Katie is going to be joined by Leanna Brown, who is VP of Business Climate for the Chamber, and also a double dog. So welcome to you too, Leanna, and thank you for being here. Leanna's been with the Chamber for 6.5 years. So she and Katie know each other quite well. I also know Katie, and really appreciate you being here, Katie. Thank you so much.
We'll do the obligatory. Good morning, everybody. Okay, come on. You can do better than that. Good morning. Okay, good. Thank you. And by the way, I don't know how many of you have ever had your bio read while you sit there. It's always so uncomfortable because you're just shaking your head going, there's so many other people in this room that have done so much more than what a bio says. So I just always sit there and shake my head. I wish they would just say my name and my title and we would get to it. But thank you all for having me. This is especially important for me to speak to you all because, one, Terry College of Business has contributed so much in terms of the workforce here in this region. And so you all are preparing, the school is preparing future leaders, and we certainly appreciate that from the Metro Atlanta Chamber's perspective. So it's really exciting to be here. And then, of course, I have a kid that is enjoying the education and fun of UGA in Athens. And we're quite proud of him. So if you want to hire Nate for an internship next summer, we would be very happy about that. One that's paid, please. So I thought it would be important for me to talk first a little bit about the Metro Atlanta Chamber and who we are, and then a little bit about what we're working on, and then Leanna will join me for a few minutes with some Q&A on leadership, and then we'll open up to all of you. And I do want to recognize I have a few of my board members in the room, and they are conspiring right now to think of hard questions for me. So y'all save me from that. So as Scotto introduced, yes, I went to Auburn University, and I am a Tiger at heart, and my parents are here with me as well, Marshall and Patty, so I'm pleased they could join me too. But I wasn't going to mention that. Well, I have to get it out of the way because most people know in this room that know me that went to Auburn, but we are delighted in the education and the opportunities that come from being a UGA grad. So I may be an Auburn Tiger at heart, but I'm very excited to be a Bulldog parent for Nate. So who is the Metro Atlanta Chamber? Scotto, we're 165 years old now. So we actually were created before the city of Atlanta was even incorporated. So we've been around for a very long time, working on issues around economic development, advocacy, and really telling the story of the Metro Atlanta region. We certainly started out as the City of Atlanta Chamber of Commerce, and now we are a regional chamber, maybe not of commerce, and the reason I say that is because we're largely driven by the business leaders in the community, and it's much more about mission and purpose and vision than it is a traditional chamber of commerce. And so the issues that we get charged with from our board to work on are usually macro in scale and have huge impact on the region. And so to give you a little sense of what the region is, I think many of you have heard of the Metropolitan Statistical Area, the MSA. We represent the 29-county MSA, which is basically all of North Georgia. And when we use that kind of geography for the chamber, it's really for our economic development team. So we have a professional team of economic developers who get up every day and think about two things. One, how do we grow economic investment in the region? And two, how do we create jobs in the region? So they get up every day, they're all certified, they're professional, they really understand what it takes to sell not only this region, but the state. They're great ambassadors for both. And that's actually how the chamber got started. There were about 10 business people in 1859 that said, how do we go to New York, Philadelphia, Boston, and tell those, I don't want to call them carpetbaggers, but tell the people from the north to come and make investments in manufacturing in Atlanta. So we've held true to those principles now for 165 years. Then in addition to that, we do advocacy, which Leanna is part of our advocacy team. But if you think about the strong business climate that we have in our region, that's because we have a business community that is grounded in making sure that we have good tax policy, that we have good regulatory structure, and that we have great infrastructure that can support the businesses that all of you work for. So that requires that we have a professional team at the Metro Atlanta Chamber that works not only at the state level, which is the predominant area that we work, but we also work at the local level at times, and then increasingly at the federal level. And so that's really important when you're thinking about how do we tell the story of Metro Atlanta to our elected officials in order to secure good policy decisions. Maybe it's money right now coming from the federal government to address challenges in the region. And so that's a really important component of what we do. And then the third piece is telling the story. And really that's super important too. So you can think of this, and I'm going to use the word three-legged stool quite often, but a three-legged stool. So you have to have a great business climate. You have to have people that understand what the assets are in the region, right, in order to get that investment and that job creation. And then you need to have that third piece, which is telling the story. How do we tell folks that are in San Francisco that are thinking about moving their company or their people here why Atlanta is the best? And so we have a full team that gets up every day, and they think of two core audiences. And their audiences are all of you, which are business decision makers. And then the second piece is, of course, the site selectors that are across the country and the world, because we also do global commerce. And then the other piece of that is talent. And so the students coming out of UGA, students coming out of any of the university system, I think I hit a button, so I'm sorry about that. So now my head's off the screen, which is great, is to talk to talent about why this is a great place to live, work, and play, and for some to raise a family. And so those are very important opportunities for us. And as Scotto mentioned, we do have a new strategic plan that we're working on. And I see a number of our team members that are in the room today around economy, talent, and community. And so again, economy, I think that makes sense, right? Like we should all be working on making sure the economy is thriving for everyone here. Talent, and I know that Justin is here, right here, who leads a lot of our talent work for us. We want to be the best and the most inclusive place to do business. We want to leverage and grow Metro Atlanta's skilled and diverse talent advantage. So that's one of the things that Justin is doing. And then community, that's our third pillar. Our work catalyzes the ecosystem to drive transformative change. So if you think about the three of those together, right? If you have a strong economy, but you don't have a strong talent pool, guess what happens to the economy? It goes down, right? If you have a community that's not working well, then sometimes you can't have a great place for talent to live, work, and play. So that impacts economy. So they're all interconnected. This is not rocket science. I hope every community is thinking about it in that way, but we are strategically now aligned around those three pillars. And I don't want to overlook the fact that we are a global city, thanks to the Olympics, which really set us on a path, that and the decision to increase international flights in the 1970s out of Hartsfield-Jackson. We are a global city. You may be surprised when I say this, but on an average year, right around 40% of the job creation and investment in Metro Atlanta comes from foreign direct investment. So 40%, that's an incredible amount coming from overseas. So that's why you see Governor Kemp right now in South Korea. They're a huge partner for the state of Georgia. Germany is a huge partner for the state of Georgia in this region, as is a number of other European countries growing. Belgium and the Netherlands, which is really interesting. That's why you saw the king and queen, perhaps, in the paper from the Netherlands. They were here because of that connectivity and business growth for their country, and they recognize the importance of Metro Atlanta and the state of Georgia. So, global commerce, we have to tell our story to the world, economic development, advocacy, marketing. Now, anyone know what size we are in terms of region in the United States? Okay, my team can't answer because they know. And David's on my board. 6. So we literally are the 6th largest region in the United States. We just leapfrogged Philadelphia and Washington, D.C. And it's not like we strive to be the 6th largest, but I will tell you we're about to be the 5th largest because we have such an in-migration of talent right now from the Northeast and the West Coast. We are adding about 100,000 new residents a year to the region. And so if you do the math, by 2050, we should be around 10 million people in this region. And so what do? How do we handle that influx of people into this region? How do we make sure they have jobs? How do we make sure they have affordable housing? Where do they live? Do our road networks and transit networks work well for them? And do we have health care? So those are types of things that we think about every day in order to make this place a great place to live. And I would like to kind of leave with this and then maybe invite Leanna up in a minute or two, is that we don't do this alone. So the Metro Atlanta Chamber, while we have a brand and we've been here a long time, we do it all through relationships. And trust is everything. And so for us, I often say, this is a proverb many of you may have heard before: if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, you go together. And so we adhere to that, right? We cannot do any of these big things without building a tent and having people inside of it. So it's a very big piece of every person that works for the Metro Atlanta Chambers to think about how they're building trust and how they're building relationships. And y'all know this, that's the same in business world, right? You can't do business without having that trust and without those relationships. And I mentioned we take direction from our region's top leaders. A few of them are in the room, so I want to thank them. But what distinguishes, I think, our business community from anyone else in this world is that we have a deep sense of community and we have a deep sense of something called civic rent, which is if you're in the business community, it is a requirement that you give back to the community. And that can look different to different people. It could be sponsoring events, it could be having your team do volunteer events, but it could also be stepping forward when there's a challenging time in the community and actually using your voice as a business leader to say, we want to help or we need to fix something and we're willing to stand up and use our own personal and professional brand to do that. You do not see this in any other community across the nation. And we hear that repeatedly from our business leaders that are here. So remember that word civic rent and ask yourselves, are you yourselves engaged in civic rent? It means giving back in a lot of different ways. So a few of those examples of where the business community came to the Metro Atlanta Chamber and said, hey, we need your help solving some of these tough problems. One is saving Grady Hospital in 2007. For those of you that may have been here, or maybe we have some Grady babies in the room, I don't know. In 2007, Grady Hospital was within 60 days of becoming insolvent and going under. And if you understand the importance of Grady Hospital, at the time and up until literally about 3 months ago, was our only level 1 trauma care center in the region. It also is our indigent care hospital, so it provides that care for those who can't pay for it. So to lose an asset like that in the region would have been devastating. It actually would have impacted economic development. We would have lost all of our sporting events. We would have been the talk of the world. To have your historic indigent care hospital closed, that would have just been tremendous. So think about just the closure of Atlanta Medical Center and what it has done, and that was such a small fraction, right? So we got on board at that point and ran a task force and ultimately changed the governance model, changed the whole way the hospital was run, and now today, I think all of you can see the successes in the community. It's well-funded, it's in the black, it's got good leadership, it's got great talent there, and it is serving the community in ways that it never had before. So that's just an example of where business leaders got in. It was hard, it was socially challenging, and they stuck with it and they did it. Funding for transportation is another example. I think that took us 10 years to get there. And then religious liberty, many of you may not be familiar with that, but it's a piece of legislation that many states use to discriminate against our LGBTQ community as well as our Jewish community. And for years we have fought that type of legislation because we're a welcoming community. And in order for us to grow, we need to welcome everyone. So those are just a few issues that we have worked on. And then when I talked about talent, I want to highlight 2 quick things. We have something called the ATL Talent Collab, which is a cohort of 35 plus. Is that right? Okay. Chief Human Resource Officers, Chief Talent Acquisition Officers that meet monthly, and they are coming up with ways to develop specific pipelines of talent into the most high-demand job areas. How many of you have a data analyst or hire for data analysts on your team? Come on, there's more of you than that. Okay, well then maybe we don't need to be working on data analysts. But data analyst is a position that you can find in almost every company, and most everyone is hiring right now for the data analyst. And so how do we build that pipeline stronger, right? So if UGA is graduating 500 people in that field, how do we get them to build a program to get to 1,000? And so it's about driving our talent into the right career paths. We also recently launched, and everybody that has a phone, I hope you look at this, the Atlanta Where You Belong campaign, which is our talent campaign. We launched it on April 22nd. This is about reaching the 22 to 40-year-olds in a 500-mile radius around Metro Atlanta to convince them that the jobs here are superior to everybody else. So sorry if you have people in Charlotte and other places, because we're going to go steal them. I keep hitting this. I'm so sorry. So that campaign is very important because it actually tells the stories of companies. It doesn't just give you stats. Right? So this is like a feeling. It's the brand awareness. It's creating that feeling that I want to be there and I'm being left out. And the way that we do that is highlighting your companies and what they're doing in the community and your employees that are in that. So if you ever have an opportunity, please visit Atlanta Where You Belong. It is a website. We also have social media, et cetera. And yes, we are on TikTok until they ban it. Continuing along the talent line is that we have 3 new programs thanks to a very, very generous grant from the Arthur Blank Family Foundation. More to come on that. But again, it's an opportunity for us to dig into how we grow those talent pipelines more aggressively here. And then, of course, with community, I can't fail to mention this, and thank you, Judge, for bringing this up. Sports plays such an important component for raising the profile of Metro Atlanta. So tonight, anybody going to the soccer match tonight? Y'all may not be. Okay, so we have Argentina, Margaret is, we have Argentina playing Canada, which means Lionel Messi is here. And so apparently downtown was jamming last night with soccer fans everywhere. But that's just a precursor to the World Cup in 2026. To give you a sense of World Cup, 5 billion people will watch World Cup. So 5 billion, that's basically the entire world, right, is watching or listening to World Cup, and Atlanta has 8 matches. So think about that. Every time we have a match, 2 days leading up to the match, Atlanta, 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 then it will broadcast from here, and then the 2 days following the match, it'll be Atlanta, Atlanta, Atlanta. And so this is a great way to tell our story, but we're also anticipating, and this is really hard to put a number around, anywhere from 300,000 to 500,000 visitors in that 30-day window will be here, unique visitors. Many of them will stay for weeks on end and use the Atlanta airport to jet out to other locations across the North America, Canada, Mexico, and United States. But Atlanta is unique in that we have 8 matches, including the semifinal. So 5 billion people, just remember that. They won't be here, but 5 billion will be saying the word Atlanta. And then anybody have any water issues in the last 2 weeks with the city of Atlanta? So that is, of course, these are the types of issues that do come up, right, that you are unplanned for, right, but become challenges for the community. Background, I am a water engineer. I haven't done that in a long time, but somehow because of that background, now I am serving on the Mayor's Water Advisory Council to start forward thinking on how we make our water and wastewater systems more resilient in Metro Atlanta. And that is a big task. So let me at least say this. You can't repair every pipe tomorrow. It's a 10 to 20 year, if you move fast, opportunity ahead of us. But how do we do that? How do we make sure that customers we minimize disruptions for customers, that there's great communication? I will say this, I said this to the mayor, that was one of the biggest faults that happened in that crisis that we experienced, was the communication for the first 12 hours was just not good. And so hopefully they will start looking a little bit more like Georgia Power. I know I've got Jamie in here. Georgia Power and Southern Company, because you all know if you lose power, what happens? You immediately get a text. You're told, hey, we think it's going to come back on at this time, and you can keep going to a website and getting updated, right? So as a consumer, I feel more comfortable because I've got information. I may still be disadvantaged for several days, but I know, like, I'm kept in the loop. So hopefully water resiliency will be a big issue. And I would challenge all of you too, as a water engineer, we think of water never, right? We go to the tap, we turn it on, water comes out, it's clean. We pay very little for it because we actually think of it as a public right versus cell coverage, right? We pay several $100s a month for our cell phones, but we pay on average $60 a month for water. So it is an issue. It's underground. We don't see it until a water line breaks, and we're kind of mystified. It is a big issue, not only for Metro Atlanta, it's actually all across this country. We have aging infrastructure and little funding to improve it. So it's a big challenge that all communities will be facing going forward. And I mentioned economic development. Just from my economic development team, they feel like I don't talk about them enough. So just to remind all of you, some of the areas that we focus on for economic development, fintech, payment processing, that's a huge, huge area of, one, employment, but also growth in this area, in the region. Clean tech is a new one for us. So think about all those battery manufacturing facilities that we've seen. You may not know this, but Metro Atlanta has the largest solar manufacturing facility in the Western Hemisphere, and it competes directly with China. We do a lot in advanced manufacturing, logistics, and robotics, because most of manufacturing now in logistics is moving toward robotics and AI. So we have a lot of emphasis there as well. So when they think about job creation, this is really where they're leaning in. But we'll take anything. So if you want to grow, please let us know. So at that point, that's a little bit about the Metro Atlanta Chamber. Now, unfortunately, I guess I have to talk about myself. And that's what Leanna's going to come up and ask me some questions. But please, I hope you're generating questions as well that are tough. Right? You got the color memo.
Yeah, thank you for sending that late last night. You're welcome. So this is either the ultimate test or the ultimate chance for me to suck up to my boss. So we'll see how I do. So Katie, one of the things that you talked about is community, and that's the fact that that's a strategic pillar of what the chamber is doing right now, and we are all, as a team, focused on leaning in that area. Why should business leaders care about the community in which they operate?
If you don't care about the community where you operate, then generally your ROI, your productivity in your business is probably going to go down. And the reason why is community involves everything from those indirect businesses to the induced businesses that are built around you. It's also where your employees live and raise their families. And so if you think about satisfaction and how your employees feel every day if they're coming to work, if they're living in a community that provides the items that they need, everything from healthcare to good education for their kids to a great road network, these things that allow them to get to baseball practice, which I've done for a very long time, you get a better employee, right? And then ultimately you get greater productivity. And so that's the economic analysis for community. But the reality is that if we don't care about our neighbors, ultimately, you don't have a thriving economy, and it's just quite simple as that. So we cannot overlook what underpins a business's success, which is the people and where they live, work, and play. So.
And there are lots of areas in the community that we as a chamber have looked at really trying to support or lead in. But then there are other areas where we are supportive or we're in a follow role. You can't be everything to everyone. So how do you decide where you're going to lead and where you're going to support?
By the way, we don't do this really well. We still have to work at it every day because when issues come to us, we want to say yes, right? Because if we feel like we might be able to do something to make a difference, we want to say yes. But then that stretches the boundaries of everybody's work. You get burned out. So what we do is we first ask ourselves the question, are we uniquely positioned to help on this issue? So in other words, if there's no one else in the community that can take the lead on it, and our business leaders, you're going to hear me talk a lot about that, our board believes that it is important, we're uniquely positioned for it, then we will make the decision to engage in a leadership role. That's actually not very often. Because we have a lot of great community partners that can lead. And that's where if we think that we're not uniquely positioned, then we will then turn to a partner and say, how can we help? Can we be supportive of you as you move this through whatever path you're doing? We're happy to lend our voice. We're happy to lend our name. Even if we have a staff person that might be able to sit on a committee, we're happy to do that. And then there's times where we just need to sit back and support from afar. It's kind of the third piece, which is, yay, great, we're going to sit over here, but we're thankful you're doing the work, but we're not engaging. We're not taking a position. We're not going to put anybody in the committee, but thank you for keeping us in the loop and let us know if you have any needs that come up. But otherwise, we're just going to stay focused on the things we do. So those are kind of the three areas. And I know our public policy team is currently thinking about this as well because of the strength and the size of our advocacy public policy team is we have a lot of subject matter experts that can stretch. And so we get pulled into a lot of issues that we probably could pull back from and use that time, talent, and treasure to advance the major issues that we're doing. So I know you all are going through a process right now to figure out what that is. Good luck.
but I still get to play with tax policy. It's really exciting. It's good stuff.
It's very important.
Yeah, not very sexy though. Okay, so your parents are here this morning, and they're fantastic people, and we hear a lot about them, and they have shaped who you are tremendously. But who are some of the other people that have shaped who you are as a professional? Who are some of your mentors? And how do you cultivate a mentorship relationship that lasts throughout your career?
Well, first, let me talk about my parents, since they're here, Patty and Marshall. Thank you. I've had two great mentors at home, right? So both my parents worked. My dad and I had the opportunity to work together for 11 years, which was fun. We could always find him at the snack table. If you had a birthday cake, I knew where to find my dad. But I got to have the experience, grow up in a household with two parents working, but also I got to work with my father for the first 11 years, which was fantastic. And then to have a mother who worked, but also made sure that, as my sister and I were, that we were taken care of. Both of them did. So it was a good reflection for me to understand that you can actually have a work-life balance. You can actually do a lot of things in the community. You can have a great family life and still have two parents that work. And I thought that was incredible. My mom's also an entrepreneur, started her own business after teaching. It was a incredible start, right? And so then I've really only worked at two companies, if you think about it, Goldkist for 11 years. And I had extraordinary, I don't know if I'd call them mentors, but I had leaders that were invested in my progression, right? So the leadership within that company, regardless of the level, were really good about reaching out and saying, hey, how you doing? You know, what are you working on these days? You know, is there anything I can do to help? It was a very collegial atmosphere in that environment. And I think that taught me something too in terms of leadership was, you know, there's not a pedestal and everybody underneath you, right? Like we're all doing this work together. And that's how I treat I hope I treat a lot of the team that way, that I may have more responsibility and accountability, but I can also go and clean a table off, and I can hand out name tags, and I can do what everyone else is doing. And so I think that was a really important lesson that I learned at Goldkist. I had a couple of gentlemen there, Michael Stimpert, Alan Merritt, that had an impact on my life, as did a gentleman, Stephen Woodruff. They were all great leaders to me. Stephen taught me how to actually write, which is incredible. You know, engineer, you don't have to write. Right? That's why I'm an engineer. No English. But the reality is I did more writing than I did anything else because I was doing argumentative technical writing, which is not a skill you learn in school. So learned a lot from them. And then when I got to the Metro Atlanta Chamber, I do have to say that Sam Williams, who was the president at the time that I was hired, and Sam is still in the community, had a big influence on me as well in terms of his love for Atlanta. I mean, it would rub people wrong sometimes, but he really cared deeply about the progress here in this region, and that rubs off on you as well. So I've just had a lot of good people throughout my life. What's interesting is I'm often asked to talk about women in leadership and how women influence you, and I'm like, I just think that's a false question. I think we interact with people all the time that make an impression on us, whether or not they're male, female, black, white, you know, whatever, that can guide you on a path forward that is positive and productive, and it's agnostic of who they are. Those are the people you need to seek out, somebody that's really going to support you. Now, how do I do that at the Chamber? You'd have to tell me, but I think it's real important. We're a small organization, right? So we're going to be about 65 people here shortly. I do a lot of skip meetings. So I have my direct reports, but then I skip over them and I meet twice a year with everyone that's one level down so that I can hear from them about what they're doing and how's it going, and do they have thoughts and recommendations for me as a leader that I can do better. I think that's really important. My one little other point that I do when I'm in the office is I make a point of walking around every day. I don't sit in my office unless I'm having a meeting or a Zoom call. I get up intentionally and walk around the office and speak to everyone I can. Hey, how you doing? How's your wife? How's your new baby? You know, how's that tough project going? What can I do to help? Or we talk about the snack drawers that we have in our office. You know, so it's just trying to be as present as possible. And that way I can serve as, whether or not it's a mentor or someone maybe they can glean some leadership lessons from, then that's a good way to act.
So you're coming up on your 4th anniversary as CEO of the Chamber. Also, her birthday is tomorrow.
Wait, before that, though, it's also my parents' 60th wedding anniversary tomorrow. So, I was their gift on their 9th wedding anniversary. If that tells you how old I am. Okay.
So your 4th anniversary as CEO, every leader faces challenges, but you stepped into the role of CEO in June of 2020. Nothing was happening in the world then. But can you talk about overcoming challenges, including imposter syndrome, and just what was it like to step into that role at that time?
Well, we'll go backwards. I still have imposter syndrome. So for those of you in the room that have that as well, it's okay. We just have to work through it. I mean, I told many of you, it feels silly that I'm sitting up here talking because there's so many of you in this room that I think have incredible stories. So I still deal with that a little bit, especially when you look at our board and who all I get the opportunity to engage with on a daily basis. The CEOs of all the major companies in town. You want to talk about imposter syndrome? I'm just a little old me. That's how I think about it. But I then have to take a deep breath and say, I was hired into this role. The board believes in me. And so stop thinking you're not worthy, right? I just a little mantra in my head. June of 2020 was a great time. We were all virtual, right? We had the economic uncertainty of the pandemic. We had health, right? We were only 90 days in, roughly, at that point. No one had the answers on what was going on with health. What do we do? Do we put people back in the workplace? Do we wear masks? Do we stand 6 feet apart? Do we stop construction? All of these questions were swirling in the community. And then, of course, you had George Floyd and the impact that had on the nation and the world. But we also had Ahmaud Arbery here, that Ahmaud Arbery's case really didn't come to the attention until after George Floyd was murdered. And so we were in a unique position also where the legislature had stopped, 32 days in, roughly 30 days in, and they still had to come back at some point in the year and finish the legislative session because they ultimately, the one thing they have to do is pass a budget. And so they had to come in and pass the budget. Well, that gave us a real opportunity at the time to push forward hate crimes legislation, which had been kind of sitting there for a couple of years. And of course, the events at the time, you leverage what's going on in the community at the time. We were able to move forward hate crimes legislation and get that passed, plus a whole raft of pieces of legislation in 10 days that addressed COVID. So I came in, leaving my position as chief policy officer, but literally had to keep doing that for the 2 weeks. I had to actually raise money because we were at the end of our fundraising cycle. So I had to go out and ask businesses to continue to invest in us, even though they had no idea what their balance sheets were going to look like going forward. I had to do it all on Zoom. So I think they tell me I did 100 Zoom calls in 30 days. In some ways, that's actually better. Right? I had them down to 27 minutes, right? Get on, talk, ask for money, secure it, click, move on to the next one. Those were some of what I call mundane challenges. But then we were talking to companies about what does their structure look like going forward? What are their challenges? What are their opportunities? We did have some companies at the time, like UPS, that were so overwhelmed with work and growth that they were struggling just to get people. And then we had other segments of the economy that were saying, we're thinking we're going to have to lay people off. We don't know what to do, right? So it was a very fractured economy at the time. And of course, supply chain issues were coming. And so all of that, I think the positive takes that I took from that, number one, I was hired from within. So I didn't have to get up to speed. I didn't have to learn the organization. The board was the one that hired me. They already knew me. So I didn't have to spend a lot of time with our board, saying, hey, I'm Katie, this is who I am, trust me. They had very good trust in who I was. And then staff, you tell me, but I think the staff had a level, it came at a time where they could say, okay, I can take a breather. She knows us, she understands what we do. We don't have to worry about our jobs changing on a dime because it's a new leader. coming in, I think that allowed for everybody to take a deep breath, including myself, and say, okay, what are our priorities going forward? And priorities at that time was month by month, right? We couldn't think 12 months out or 2 years out. It was month by month. So it was, looking back, it was such an interesting time. I remember on TikTok and Instagram, people were like, oh, I'm making sourdough bread, and I've got my sourdough starter, and I'm taking walks, and I got a new dog. And I was like, I'm working 20 hours a day, 7 days a week. I don't know what you guys are doing. So that was a little bit of a mind change for me, too, is that half the world was living this very different life than we were. And so from a leadership perspective, I think it really challenged me to dig deep into what my strengths are, right? And that's when you're in a stressful situation, you oftentimes fall back to what you know best. Sometimes that's not good, by the way. And so I had to really think about what can I do well? And one of those was connect with people. And so I spent a lot of time staring at that damn screen, talking to people over and over and over again, because that was what people needed at a time, which was connection. And they needed information. And so that's what we served from. And that's what you all as a team did, was served as that connector. And that's what we leveraged during that time. And I think that was really important and instructive coming in at that time. Thank God we're not there anymore. Now we're growing faster than the national average. We have other challenges ahead of us, like affordable housing, our downtown. How do we make that a more inviting and reimagined space? Our infrastructure. I mean, there's a lot of challenges that are ahead of us, but I would take those any day versus where we were 4 years ago.
Okay, this is my last question because I know it's time for Q&A. But one of the things that I notice as an employee, and when people ask about working at the Metro Atlanta Chamber, they ask about work-life balance. I'm like, well, let me tell you, it starts at the top, because our CEO has such good work-life balance. And I distinctly remember when I started, from my perspective, and that's a culture that she cultivates. But I distinctly remember hearing on calls early in the year the metal ping of those baseball bats, where hopefully Nape was hitting a home run or something. I distinctly remember being on a call, and Katie's like, I'm at the baseball field because this is a priority. My kids are first. So talk a little bit about the work-life balance and how you look after your career, but also your family, the two important things in your life.
This is something I'm very passionate about, and I am not a big believer in the word work-life balance, because I think that indicates that you are 100% in each one all the time, and that you're failing if you're not. I think that's incorrect. I think it's setting priorities and leading in that space. So for me, ultimately being mom is my number one priority. I have said that from day one. I said it when I interviewed at the Metro Atlanta Chamber. I was like, if this position cannot give me the flexibility to be with my children when I need to be, then I'm happy where I am. And so I learned it actually from Sam. Sam was very good about that too. So I've always made my children my priority and my family. So Nape's sitting here. He probably doesn't realize this, how many times I probably was on a call at a baseball game or whatever, but I was always at their sporting events, at their school events. If they were, God bless, having a recorder. Sarah, you know what I'm talking about, those little black flute things, I would be there. Like, this was not an option for me. Now, I did really hard work to plan it in advance, get it onto my calendar, block it off, worked with, if I had an EA, this is important. But also, like any doctor's appointment, and we spent a lot of time in the orthopeds and hospitals because I have 2 boys. We were at the doctor a lot. That's also a non-negotiable. I think very few times, and thankfully my parents live here, as do my in-laws, they would also be able to step in those very few instances where my husband or I could not. And my husband, Dow, is a Georgia Bulldog, just so you know that. I know that he's got some friends in here. But so I really, and I'm very open about that, and I encourage our employees. I don't care how important the meeting is. If you need to be at your 5th grade son's graduation, you're going, right? This is just non-negotiable. And so I just do that every day. I lead it every day, even to this point, because I have a 20-year-old, he's off living the best life in college, so he doesn't need me as much anymore. But I'd still have a rising senior at home. He doesn't need me, according to him. But they still are my priority, and they will be, just regardless. And so I lead with that. I have attempted to make our policies at the chamber be as flexible as possible for our working parents. We give paid paternity leave. We are going to be making some changes, y'all don't know this yet, on our maternity leave, and really looking at our benefit structure so that it benefits our working families, but also those, by the way, not everybody's a working family. We have a lot of single professionals in our organization that are either taking care of elders, be it a parent or an aunt or an uncle, or they may be a caregiver for a special needs brother or sister. All of that should be part of that work-life balance. It is not just for working parents. We even have people with senior dogs. And if you have a dog, you know how much they mean to you. And we're very respectful of them if they need to do things around their dogs. I know that may seem asinine, but you know what I get in return? I get a great employee that is very productive and cares about coming in every day. And so that's how I think about it, but I think everyone within the chamber thinks about that flexibility. So,
Obviously, everyone here is a big supporter of dogs. Spelled with an A, of course. When Nate decided to go to UGA, I was like, heck yeah, we got to win. We're converting this Auburn grad over here. Okay, now we have time for questions. And there's a microphone coming to you.
Good morning. Can you talk about the chamber's role in public transit?
Sure. So the question was, can I speak about our role in public transit? We have been one of probably the most fierce advocate for expansion of transit in this region since 1997. And it's something that is challenging to me because we're such a car-dependent society. How do we transition even 5% of that traffic into transit is just going to be a challenge as we grow because people come and they love their cars, and we haven't expanded our transit system substantively in 35 years. And so for us, it's really important for a couple of reasons. We used to talk about it from a congestion mitigation perspective, like, hey, if we can just get more people on transit, we'll move faster on the highways. The reality is that's not why we need transit. It's certainly a good point of transit. We need it because, one, it connects local workforce to jobs they couldn't otherwise connect to, right? So if you live in Clayton County, you should have the opportunity now to get to a job in North Fulton and do it pretty seamlessly. It doesn't work that way, but that's the theory, right? Number two is it allows you to access healthcare, quality healthcare. So if you live in a community that doesn't have access to good quality healthcare, transit should be able to be a means for you to access what you need until we can get good quality healthcare in that region. And then the third is education. How do we get people who are either in high school and perhaps they're taking the train to a private school like Woodward, or to our interns? The ones that work for Cristo Rey. I don't know if any of you are familiar with Cristo Rey. These students, right, they need public transit, one, to get to school, but two, to get to their job opportunities. So it's really important for us that this is a community asset. It's not a congestion mitigation opportunity. So we have, for 30 years now, I guess, been working with MARTA. I'll be quite frank, I think MARTA has some challenges right now in terms of how they are thinking about their system and how they're maintaining and expanding. You're seeing the conversation around 5 points in the news right now. 5 Point Station is the hub of the entire system, so we have some concerns there. And so we work collaboratively with MARTA and the other counties. So we have been actively engaged with Cobb and Gwinnett on their efforts to expand transit into their counties. Gwinnett, for the fourth or fifth time, is going to the polls this fall to try and pass transit funding. They got within half a percentage point last time. And we can talk about the failures in that campaign later. But we're hopeful to see them pass that. And Cobb, I think, is on a direction as well to begin transit there. So we all, as business leaders, need to be pro-transit because it has an impact on our workforce and our community. I think we had one right here. Dante? I can actually see that far. Not up close, I don't. I need my readers.
Thanks, Katie. A couple things that you mentioned, too, was one of the big pillars is community of the chamber, right? And one thing that you've harped on a lot is affordable housing and how the metro is growing. And coming from someone who bought a house in the last year, it's not...
God bless.
Yeah. It's not an easy process. So how is the chamber kind of tackling that challenge?
We're not yet. I'm just going to be quite honest with you. I think there's macro issues in the marketplace, and then there's micro issues in the market, right? So macro right now is high interest rates. So that not only impacts the home buyer, but it also impacts the companies that build the homes, right? So their costs for supplies and the borrowing capacity and their capital stack gets inverted when the interest rates are this high. So that's a strain, right, just on the macro side of things. And then on the micro side of things is we actually are very strong supporters of density. And not all of our communities believe that density is important, so they haven't zoned appropriately to have density in communities. Now, please understand, I'm not advocating for Buckhead, where we live, and I know that's a big concern, to have all dense development, but we need to have corridors or zones of density to allow for more affordable housing, right? So if you can build on a postage stamp but go up, it's more affordable than spreading things out this direction, right? So one area we are beginning to dig into is the conversion of office to residential. That's huge opportunity. It's also a huge obstacle because the numbers right now still aren't penciling out. Although there are a lot of people trying it, and we hope they're successful. I really applaud the first movers in this space because they're taking huge risk. That's going to be real important in our aging areas. So if you think of downtown Atlanta, it is no longer a central business district. We just as a community have to accept that. But what it could be is a very vibrant neighborhood that has more residential in downtown. It also, this might blow your mind, but Georgia State right now needs 6,000 extra beds. So that's a real opportunity in downtown too, is to look at some of this older building commercial stock and seeing, can you convert it? And as my board member, Colin Connolly with Cousins said, you just got to wait till everything gets to a certain price point for somebody to come in and buy the buildings and potentially not redevelop the whole thing, right? You might redevelop a portion of it because your basis is now so low. So I just would close by saying we don't have an answer yet. Our chair coming in next year, I believe, who I can't say yet, is going to want to focus on that. So we may be moving in that direction to find out ways. Remember that the Metro Atlanta Chamber can uniquely influence this. And some people say, well, why don't you call Raphael Bassick at the Fed and tell him to lower rates? I'm like, I've tried. I text him all the time. Can you please lower rates? And I just get a smiley face. That's all I get back from him.
Do we have time for one more, or are we wrapped up? We have time for one
Scotty?
more.
All right, right there.
Good morning. Thanks for coming.
Good morning.
I just would love to hear you expand on the Grady Hospital situation. I don't know how involved you were personally in that or not, but just maybe tell us about what the real problems were and what the chamber was able to do to help it out.
Okay, I'm reaching back. I actually started in August of 07, and they were already deep in the process, but I think I know enough about it to give some perspective. You have to rewind the tape. This was an interesting story in that Pete Carell, which I believe Carell, right, at the Terry College. Pete Carell, who was a luminary in this community, and this is where he was willing to leverage his personal and his professional brand as the CEO of Georgia Pacific at the time. And Tom Bell, I think many people know Tom, former Cousins, properties guy, they were having their customary gin and tonic at a bar, and the two of them were kind of bemoaning, what are we going to do about Grady? We can't let Grady fail. Who can do this? And they literally, on a cocktail napkin that someone still has to this day, I don't know where it is, drew out what they thought needed to happen on a cocktail napkin. I think that was after the third gin and tonic, they say. But they drew it out, and then they came to the chamber, and they said, we cannot, as a community, afford to let Grady fail. And you all have the capacity to convene people and bring in experts and solve this. And Sam Williams at the time said, no, not interested, not our lane. And our board members probably don't know that. And they came back 2 more times to him and said, no, you're going to do this. And so finally, I think the opportunity and the challenge kind of settled in on Sam, and he said, I get it, okay. And so what they did, and this is kind of a hallmark of the chamber, is we went out and we got a wonderful consulting firm for pro bono to come in. So, and I can't remember which one did it. BCG, McKinsey, Bain, someone in that range, came in and they created a task force of business, civic, and elected leaders. And then they created working groups. So there was like a working group on press. There was a working group on community involvement, those types of things. So they pulled in a bunch of folks with disparate positions and beliefs into this, which made it very challenging. But here were the primary obstacles. Was the way the governance structure was. It was a hospital authority that was governed by legacy appointees that had no experience running a billion-dollar enterprise. And it was fraught with politics, and it was fraught with nepotism. And so we had to change that structure because it ultimately was not what you needed. So they created an overarching board governance structure that has the power through new articles of incorporation, all that kind of stuff, right? They redid all the governance. And then this hospital authority actually sits underneath them now. But the real structure is that overarching one, and that's usually like the CEO of UPS, I think, is the chair right now of Grady Hospital Board. So pulling people in that capacity. 2, they set forth a strategic plan on how do we change the management structure at Grady. We've got to change what we pay, how we structure, those types of things. So they had a whole group that went out and recruited the best and the brightest to lead not only the hospital, but also like the emergency department and those types of things. And then the last thing was they brought in the philanthropic community and said, if we're going to, we made all these changes, but they still don't have money in the bank, right? So I think $300 million in philanthropic dollars came in the first 3 months of the project being completed, and that allowed 2 things to happen. 1, get their books back into the black, right? But 2, it allowed them to do things like pursue paying customers. And so they were able to do things, the Marcus Stroke Center, the burn center, the emergency department. I'm trying to think of the other ones, but they were able to take the areas that were making money for them, blow those out so that the balance sheet changed, and then continue to give the care to the indigent population and those that can't pay. So all of that was a fantastic turnaround. So I don't know if that answers your question. I'm happy to talk offline with you. You're welcome. Scott.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Hope I didn't bore y'all too much.
Not at all. And the mayor was here a few months ago.
I have to follow him. He's like
Correct.
the most exciting, vibrant,
He was great, but it was pre-water problem.
Okay.
So you got the hard job of coming in and talking about that issue. So thank you
Gonna
for
help
that, and glad it's in good hands. So that concludes this morning's program. Katie, thank you. We cannot be more appreciative. Like we do for all of our speakers, we'd like to present you with a glass sculpture as a token of our appreciation, and it is red and black, so it'll look great in your home. And as a reminder to the audience, please...